For background, I'm an 18-year-old female in my first semester of college. I've always seemed to get a lot of attention from guys and tend to attract some pretty creepy ones for some reason. Probably because I'm overly nice and have a hard time telling people to just screw off, even when I get bad vibes from them. Anyway, I decided to get Tinder over the summer due to quarantine. All of my classes for college are online, so I'm not able to meet many people. I thought if I got Tinder, I could get to know some people from my university and maybe even go on some dates. I got a lot of matches. Some guys were really nice and cool to talk to, and then obviously got some people just wanting to hook up, which I'm not into, but nothing too abnormal. That's what Tinder's mainly for after all. After a few months, I ended up matching with a guy from out of state. We matched because he was in the area for work. He was 8 years older than me, but I didn't mind. First red flag right there. He seemed pretty nice, and he asked for my snap, so I gave it to him. We talked a little, and within a couple of days, he became very clingy and obsessive. I have an extremely busy major, and most of my time is taken up from school. Because of this, I'm not always on my phone, and can't answer messages right away. If I didn't answer for an hour or two, he would message me again and again. He said things like, "Why won't you talk to me? Are you seeing someone else? I wouldn't be surprised, you're so beautiful. And I need you." I thought this was very strange, as I just started talking to him and we clearly weren't seeing each other. I explained to him that I'm very busy with school and it was nothing personal. He said he respected that, and we continued talking. Obviously, that didn't last very long, or I wouldn't be telling this story. He continued to text me constantly, telling me he needed me and asking me why I was ignoring him. He started talking about driving 2 hours to see me. I was weirded out, but I assumed that he was just lonely and desperate. I felt bad, so I tried to brush it off and answer when I could, because he didn't really do anything too concerning. Stupid, I know. This continued for a few weeks, and I started to get extremely annoyed. I had a bad gut feeling about this guy. He started talking sexual, and I told him I wasn't into that. He apologized and said he would stop. He didn't. No surprise there. So I started ignoring his messages. He apologized and I called him out for it. He continuously apologized, and I left him on read. He started Snapchatting me pictures and constantly messaging me, so I unadded him. Then he texted me with another apology and said he hoped he could take me on that date we talked about, even though I never expressed interest in going on a date. I ignored that message too, and moved on with my life. About 2 weeks later, I got the message that simply said, "I'm sorry." I ignored that too. He didn't message me after that, and it soon slipped my mind once again. Later that week, I had a dream about him breaking into my house and attempting to kidnap me. I started thinking about it again, so I tried looking him up on Instagram. He didn't have an Instagram, which I didn't think was too weird because I know some people who only use Facebook, so I tried looking him up on there. He didn't have Facebook either. Now, that was weird. Most people have one or another, if not both. I thought it was so strange that this guy didn't have any form of social media besides Snapchat and Tinder. I wondered if he used a fake name. Then I decided to try one last thing. I searched his name on Google. What I found made my blood run cold. The first thing that came up was an article for his arrest back in January, with his mugshot. He was arrested for child pornography. They found several photos of an underage girl on his phone. He was released on bail a few days later. I was absolutely disgusted. This man was a predator, and he was free to do as he pleased and prey on younger girls. When I think about it, my guess is that he saw I was 18 and thought he could still get something from a younger girl without getting into trouble because I'm legally an adult. I'm not stupid enough to send any revealing photos or videos. I'm glad I stopped being so nice and listened to my gut when things progressed. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't, and I wonder if my dream was a sign for me to look into who he was. It still creeps me out that he was so obsessed with me when I didn't talk to him for very long at all. So the creepy Tinder dude that preys on underage girls, let's not meet. To start this off, I'd like to give a bit of context. This happened 4 years ago. I'm a girl, and at the time this happened, I was 12 going on 13 in just a month or two. The friend I mentioned in this story was 14 at the time. The friend, Sally, who I was staying with that night, was quite a bit older than me. At least, at the time, a 2-year age gap was quite big. At 12 or 13 years old, I was about to start my second year of middle school, whereas Sally had been about to begin her sophomore year of high school. I met her in the beginning of my first year at a new school. She was older than the other kids in our grade and was considered one of the popular kids, and I think that was what drew me to her at first. We became fast friends, and before we knew it, we were spending every single weekend together. Seriously, every single weekend. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. It was your typical Friday night. We carpooled to her family's apartment after school. I've always been a picky eater, so when her family had dinner, I didn't eat with them. I just snacked on a Pop-Tart that I had stowed away in my backpack in case they ordered something I wouldn't eat. Something to note is her family was pretty religious. I wouldn't go as far as to say they were fanatics, but they didn't allow their kids to watch horror movies or anything that was rated PG-13 or older. It didn't stem from the desire to protect them from something inappropriate. Sally's mother had an irrational fear that scary movies had satanic messages. We asked to watch The Purge, and her mum obviously said no. After some negotiating, she agreed to let us watch Hunger Games instead. After the movie, Sally and I went to hang out in her room. She put on some music, and being the ages we were, we gave each other makeovers. By the end of it, we were looking much older than 12 and 14. This part of the night is when things started to seem off to me. Sally wasn't the most positive influence. Despite being my best friend at the time, she was manipulative and got off on putting me down. She had a habit of talking to men online and lying about her age. Sally showed me some texts between her and the man she was talking to. I can't give you an exact recount of them, but they consisted of him trying to convince her to meet up with him and just the usual things you'd expect from a creep online. According to him, he was 19, tall, and blonde with soulful eyes. Once I saw the texts, I asked if she had a picture of him. Something didn't sit right with me after seeing the messages. She showed me what he looked like, and he was very clearly not 19. This man was at least 40, and looks like he lived in his mother's basement. Then we got a call from him. Sally answered without hesitation, and when I heard the voice on the other end of the call, I felt like I was going to be sick. "You're so pretty. Why don't you come meet me?" he asked. Sally said that she couldn't because she was spending the night with a friend. The mention of that sparked his interest, and then he proceeded to try and ask us both to meet him. Sally, lacking any common sense, said yes. Thus begun her plan for us to sneak out and walk 15 blocks to meet him in a deserted McDonald's parking lot. I didn't want to go. I was raised on stories of what happens to teen girls who meet random men from the internet in person. But after adamant pleading from Sally that she didn't feel safe going by herself, I agreed. We took our phones with us for the walk. I had a kitchen knife stuffed in my bra in case something were to happen and I needed to defend myself. The route we had to take to get there didn't have very many street lamps, and there weren't any houses. We were surrounded by trees on both sides of us. When we got to the parking lot, the only car parked nearby was a black beat-up 2000 Toyota Corolla. The car was still running when we got there, and from what we could tell, there was more than one person inside. The man from the picture got out of the front passenger seat and left the door open behind him before approaching us. I turned my flashlight on so I could see, and he was obviously on something. I can't tell you what kind of drug it was for the life of me, but his eyes were so wide they looked like they were about to pop out of his head. He was jittery and kept twitching. I became very conscious of how big he was, maybe 6'2", around 280 pounds. For reference, my friend and I did not look our ages. Even without makeup, I'm 5'2". My friend was pretty tall, probably around 5'6", 5'7". We were both significantly smaller than him. The man reached out for us and caught my friend by the arm. I went to get my knife as quickly as I could, and that's when I saw his friend getting out of the car. He invited us back to the car and offered us booze and drugs, but after seeing my knife and that I was ready to call the police, he released my friend. I took Sally's arm and ran faster than I have ever ran in my entire life. We took the long way home to avoid them finding out where she lived, in case they were following us. Once we got there, her family was still sound asleep. We locked all the doors, closed the blinds, and blocked him on everything. There wouldn't be any sleeping that night. We were constantly peeking out the window, and to our dismay, the same Toyota was circling around her apartment building. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. I never mentioned any of this to my parents out of fear of getting grounded or in trouble. I'm 16 now, and they still have no clue. I still get nervous when I see a car similar to the one from that night. As for Sally, her parents never found out either. We agreed to never speak about it again. Thankfully, she moved into a new house just a few weeks after that happened. Safe to say that Sally and I haven't spoken in 3 years. She was pissed at me for, quote, ruining her night, and our friendship didn't last long after that. We had a pretty bad falling out, but looking back on it now, it was definitely for the better. So to Sally, thank you for teaching me a very valuable lesson and making me realize that some people are best just left alone. And to the man and his friend who tried to prey upon 2 young girls, let's not ever meet again. So this happened to me about 8 years ago. I used to work at a tobacconist when I was 18, my first job after graduating high school, but not my first job in retail. Staff there were hired as casual employees, but on full-time hours. I got the job at the time because I was young, and that meant I was cheap labor, but the pay was pretty decent, and I was job hunting, and took the first job I was offered so I could move out of home. When I first started, there were 4 of us employed. 2 of us would be on a shift at a time, with a 1-hour handover. The opening hours were 8 AM to 6 PM. I was happy doing the closing shifts because I wasn't a morning person. A couple of months into my employment, the company decided to change their business hours during weekdays from 8 AM to 8 PM, with one 9 PM on late night shopping. This upped my hours, so more money, and of course, I was put on a couple of closing shifts, with rotation between me and another worker. But only one person would stay at the shop from 6 PM. I was a little bit iffy about this because I lived in a sketchy suburb in a sketchy town. The later it got in the night, the more the undesirables were abundant. Our laws prohibit us from carrying protection, and at the time I didn't drive, so I relied on buses or taxis as transport. Taxis weren't reliable here. You'd call one, and they wouldn't show or would make you wait an hour or so I stuck with buses because you knew they'd arrive. Uber wasn't an option back then. There was a transit bus stop 1 minute away from my work. One scheduled to leave about 5 minutes before our closing time. I tried to negotiate with my boss to close a little early, but he wasn't open to the idea. "Can't you catch a cab?" he offers. Yeah, I could, but that's not guaranteed. I usually got them on my 9 PM shifts. So my routine was to stay on till closing and wait 30 to 40 minutes for the next bus. As practice, I would wait in the closed store until 5 minutes before the bus arrived, then walk and wait by the stop. So one night, I shut shop, hang out a bit inside with the lights on so the shopping centre security knows I'm still there, and head out to the bus stop at around 8:30 PM. I was relieved to see there were about 6 other people waiting at the stop. As I'm standing there, waiting for the bus, a guy in his 30s or 40s, who is visibly intoxicated, and on other stuff, who knows what, approaches me. He said, "Where are you headed?" So I replied, "Home." He then said, "Can I come with you?" I shake my head no. He then takes a step closer, and he is so close I can smell and feel his breath on my face. Automatically, I step back so I'm not out of my comfort zone, and try to walk closer to the other people. A regular customer I liked could see me and try to start up a conversation to get me out of talking to this creep, but the creep got real pissed at me. He got intimidating and told me to look back at him when he was talking to me. He was smiling in a way that made me feel sick, and my whole body suddenly rushed with adrenaline. I tried to say, "I'm not talking to you," but he just kept trying to get closer to me and insisted that we were going home together. Thankfully, the buses finally started to arrive, and I started feeling relieved, hoping that this guy would get on one before me. Nope. He lingers and asks what bus I'm getting on. There was no way I'm telling him, so I ask him what bus he's getting on. If it's the same one as me, I'm catching a different one. Well, he told me he's getting on mine. My heart sank. My bus was the last in line, so everyone was piling onto theirs, and I was about to be left alone with this guy. I knew he would follow me. If I tried to call the cops on the bus, would he become aggressive? I was already in "how the hell do I get out of this" mode. Just as my bus pulls up and the doors open, the transit security pulls up behind and rush out of the car yelling at the creep, "We told you to move on from here." The creep starts cussing and yelling, but walks away. Security ask if I'm alright. I just nod and jump on the bus before it pulls away. I'm so grateful they arrived when they did, and I dread to think what could have happened if this man did follow me home. So creepy unstable man, let's not meet again. I've had a lot of scary things that have happened in my life, probably more than my fair share. When I was a child, I was nearly kidnapped 3 separate times. I only remember one of them, but my family has 2 other times that they say happened, which I'll briefly go over. One of these times was at a barrel racing competition in Camp Verde, Arizona. A lady picked me up as an infant and tried to run away with me, but my dad chased her and she put me down. Another time, someone else tried to break into our car when my mum left me inside for a moment to drop the mail at the post office. Apparently, even as a kid, I had the presence of mind to honk the horn until she came out and the guy left. Again, I don't remember these specific instances, and you know as much as I do now. The one time I do remember, I was a little bit older, and my brother and his best friend were there too. My mum owned a restaurant, and we would go to Costco and buy tons of wholesale food in one stop. And she would bring us along, mostly because she didn't want to pay a babysitter, but also because we were cheap labor and would load and unload the car in exchange for chicken fingers or Costco pizza. This time, my brother and his friend and I opted to get paid up front and had a Costco pizza while my mum went around the store and got everything on her list. We ate our food, and before we went to look for our mum, went into the bathroom. There were 3 stalls, and my brother and his friend were on either side, with me in between them. I think I was singing while sat on the toilet, and didn't notice when someone else came in. I don't remember much about what he looked like, other than he had a denim jacket, and I think he had a skinny, clean-shaven face. I know this much because he looked under the stall door, right at me. I was scared and stopped making noise, and my brother asked if I was okay, and the guy stopped looking at me and disappeared. Nothing happened for a minute, and then suddenly, the man's arm reached under and grabbed my pants which were around my ankles. He tried to drag me out under the door, but I screamed and put my hands under both sides of the stall, and my brother and his friend grabbed them and held on to me. I think my brother yelled at the guy, and we were all screaming. They kept pulling me until the guy let go, and we heard him run out of the bathroom. We tried to run out to get a look at him, but he was gone. When we told my mum, she went to the Costco people to see if they had surveillance tapes, but they said the police needed to be involved and warrants and stuff needed to be gotten. We ended up just going home. It was one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me, and I think it still affects me today. I sleep with my bedroom door locked and have nightmares about home intruders pretty often. This happened at the Costco in Flagstaff, Arizona, probably somewhere between 1999 and 2001, and I've always wondered if something else like that has ever happened in that area, or if someone was ever caught for kidnapping in the area around that time. I just hope we never meet again. Many moons ago when I was 15 or 16, I worked at Dairy Queen. The store was located on a street where taxis were always back and forth, so I never had to call a cab. I would just wait for one to drive up and hail it. My parents didn't drive, so we had a deal where they would pay for half of the cab ride. Whenever I worked the closing shift, midnight or later, depending on how long it took us to clean up, my co-worker, who lived right next door to the store, would wait with me on the picnic tables until I was able to hail a cab. Late one night, while sitting on the picnic tables, I noticed a car drive by us. It seemed to slow down, but kept going. I don't know what made me take notice, but I did. Anyway, a taxi comes by and I hail it. The co-worker, assuming I'm in the cab, goes home. I told the driver where I wanted to go, but he said that he wasn't going that way, so I went back to the picnic table by myself. I wasn't too concerned because, like I said, taxis would be up and down the street all the time. While I'm waiting, the car I had clocked earlier comes around the corner and pulls into a parking lot. Then the driver gets out of the car and starts walking towards me. To this day, I don't know why I didn't just run to my friend's house. He said, "It's kind of cold tonight, isn't it?" It wasn't, but I just agreed. Then he said, "It's kind of lonely too." Cue inner freaking. He went on to say, "God told me to stop and talk to you." At this point, I saw a taxi pull into the parking lot across the street. I didn't say anything, but just started walking towards the cab. The creep said, "I can give you a ride," but I said, "No, that's okay." Then he said, "I love you." I sprinted for that cab. Probably broke world records, I swear. Jumped in the back of the cab and asked the driver if he was working, and could he drive me home. He knew I was freaked out and got me home safely. I was so afraid the creep would follow. After that, I called a cab every single time I worked late and waited inside the store until the cab arrived. After I got my license and a car, when I worked late with other girls that had to wait for a ride, I waited with them inside the store and gave them a ride home myself. If they argued, I told them my story. Creepy Dairy Queen guy, I don't love you, and let's not meet. This happened to me in my junior year of high school, and I almost forgot until my dad brought it up a couple of days ago. So I live really close to a shopping centre, like 3 minutes away. Before school, maybe once or twice a week, I'd stop by to grab donuts or orange juice. I go to this store a lot, so I recognize a decent amount of employees. One day before school, I decide to stop by and grab donuts. The layout of the entrance is important. As you walk up to the doors, there's a huge set of shopping carts that an employee is normally working at by collecting carts from the parking lot. As you're walking away from the entrance and out of the store, if you turn left, you go into the main, large parking lot. You can walk straight, instead, to the side of the building, where there are around 20 parking spots. There's an exit on the side of the building that's closer to my house and less crowded than the main road, and I drive a truck, so I used to park on the side. It's well lit, cameras, next to another store, etc. So I've never felt isolated. Anyway, I park on the side like normal and walk into the store. As I pass the grocery carts in front of the doors, there's an employee there who I don't recognize. He says good morning to me and I say it back. Nothing weird. I go into the store and get my donuts, pay, and walk out. I see the guy again, and he's just staring at me. Okay, kinda weird, but I keep walking to my car. I get to the driver's side, open it and hop in, set my food down on the passenger side, and turn to reach out and close the driver door. As I put my hand out, another hand stops the door from shutting, and the employee from earlier steps in between my door and me. Alarms are going off in my head. He asks what my name is, and I, stupidly, give him my real name because I was panicking. My name is super common, such as Sarah. Not my real name, but as equally common. He asks for my phone number, and I say no. I have to get to school, and I'm running late. He wouldn't take no for an answer, and would not move. I give him a fake number, and he finally backs out of my door. I shut it immediately and take off. I go to the parking lot of my school, and called my dad to tell him what had just happened and what the guy looked like, and he went down and reported it for me. I thought this was the end, but it got weirder. A couple days pass, and I get a direct message on Instagram from this guy. No way he knows my last name, just my first, which again is super common. I got this DM during my history class, in which we sat in groups of 4. I tell the people at my table what happened, and without bringing up what he looks like or his name, a girl at my table, also named Sarah, pulls his Instagram page up and asks if it's him. It was, and I asked how she knew. Apparently, he had DM'd her as well, and another girl in our class, also named Sarah. I had 1 or 2 other friends with the same name, so I asked them if they got a DM from this guy too, and sure enough, they did. One of the girls with my name works at the store with him, and she said he was insanely creepy around her all the time, like following her to the break room any time she'd go in, finding excuses to be around her, switch shifts to work at the same time, asking her out every other shift. She tells us he was 21 at the time, which we were all 16 or 17, making it even creepier. He's going for all these high school girls with the same name. During lunch, I stayed in my history teacher's room with a couple of the girls who got messages as well, and we explained to him what was going on. And he said to go to campus security and tell them just to be sure he isn't around the school. The girl who works with him went to report it, and that was that. My dad said the manager said he would take care of it when he reported it. The girl who worked with him said she talked to her manager as well, and the guy ended up getting fired, and a police report was made, but nothing could really be done since he hadn't done anything. Here's the DM he sent me that day in history. No clue how he found my Instagram, but our guess was he was messaging a bunch of Sarahs, who all happened to be underage. So creepy guy at the grocery store. Let's not meet. This happened when I was 13 and in the 8th grade, and I'm a girl. The middle school I went to was about a 15-minute walk, so not very far away. For context, my older brother and I grew up in East LA, in a small house that had a metal gate, and both the front and back doors had a black metal screen door and a wooden door. During the day, we would always leave the wooden door open and have the black metal door closed and locked, except this day. That day, I came home from school and had about an hour before anyone else would be home. I was really thirsty, so I rushed inside, grabbed a drink, and sat down at the kitchen table, which was about 10 feet away from the front door. I heard the metal gate open and was surprised as no one should have been coming home that early. I got up to see who it was, and I saw an older man, probably in his 60s. He had short white hair and a long white beard. He was wearing an AC/DC t-shirt, torn jeans, and sunglasses. I remember thinking he looked a lot like Santa Claus, but dirty and creepy. He knocked on the metal screen door and asked if my parents were home. I was a dumb kid and said they weren't. He got a smile on his face and said that he collected donations for needy children. I said sorry, but I don't have any money. And he said sometimes children donated old toys. While I said I didn't have any old toys to donate, he insisted that I must have some toys that I didn't want anymore. He was beginning to creep me out, and I noticed I hadn't locked the door when I came inside. I tried to keep my cool as I slowly and very carefully locked the door. I kept talking to him so he wouldn't notice. A minute or two later, He wouldn't leave, so I decided I would pretend to check for toys and then say I didn't have any, so he would hopefully leave. I told him I would go check, and as I turned and took a few steps down the hall, I clearly heard him yank at the door trying to open it. I didn't want him to know that I had heard, so I kept walking down the hall and into a room. I didn't have a cell phone, and the only phone in the house was in the kitchen. I thought about what to do and decided to stick with my plan. After about 2 or 3 minutes, I walked out hoping he had left. Nope. Creepy Santa Man was still there. I told him sorry, but I didn't find anything. He sighed and said, alright, he would check another time. He left and walked across the street. I watched from the kitchen window, peeking through the blinds, as he stood there, staring at my house, for about 45 minutes. My brother and a few of his friends finally came walking down the street. As my brother came inside, and his friends kept walking down the street, the man walked around the corner and disappeared. I told my brother what happened, and he walked outside to look, but Creepy Santa Man was long gone. When my mum came home, we told her what happened, and she called the police, but they said to call back if he showed up again. Thankfully, he never showed up, so Creepy Santa Man, let's not meet. So I guess I found out why people don't pick up hitchhikers now. As I was driving from Texas to Cali, around an hour after I started my drive, I saw this guy with his dog on Route 66 in the middle of nowhere, at least 3 miles away from even the nearest gas station. It's cold, and I wasn't in a rush, so I decided to ask him if he wanted a ride. Turns out he was trying to go to a city in Arizona that was only 20 miles off my route, so I offered to let them join the trip. He was chill and seemed normal, and looks like he cared for his dog. His original story was that he started walking in Mississippi after whatever rubbish reason. He lost his job and everything went down the drain, so he walked and hitched to Texas, where he got stuck for 3 months and was trying to get to his mum so she could help him out. I bought him food after asking if he ate, which he said he hadn't. Okay, them good deed endorphins are hitting just right, and I feel like I'm doing a good thing. After around 200 miles, he tells me he just called his mum while I was refilling my gas, and apparently she went to LA for a vacation. So he would just ride with me until I got to Cali. Okay, kinda weird and sporadic, but I didn't pay it too much mind. We chatted and again seemed pretty normal until we got to Arizona. He started bringing up Trump and how the election was stolen by pedophiles during this timeline. Okay, red flag, but I just asked him to drop it as I don't like to talk about politics. He then asks if I can drop him off at his, quote, 2 girlfriends, at his house which he got after his mum passed, and he inherited in a town in Arizona. He said he called beforehand, and they were expecting him after 3 months away. Also, he mentions, almost like it's nothing during an earlier conversation, that he has mild schizophrenia. I started putting it all together. Oh crap, I don't even think he has a coherent goal of what he's doing. So we get to Arizona finally, and we're on the last 10 miles to his now 1 girlfriend, which he claims he loves. I start to wonder, am I about to drop a mentally ill man off 2 states away, in the middle of nowhere, where it's about to get freezing temperatures tonight? Oh, and plot twist, he apparently didn't even have a phone. As we got to his quote-unquote girlfriend's house, I told him, hey, want me to wait here just in case she isn't home? thinking I could at least talk him to letting me drop him off at the nearby homeless shelter or something. And exactly what I thought would happen, happened. I guess I got the wrong info and she doesn't live there. My other family members live there though. Yeah, let's just go to Cali to see my mum. As he sat down in the car, which I have been driving with him for over 9 hours, I told him that maybe he isn't in the best mental state at the moment, and his mental illness could be playing tricks with him. He flipped his lid out of nowhere and said if I bring up his schizophrenia again, he would kill me. He wasn't threatening at all, so I simply said, "Bro, I don't feel comfortable driving you to Cali, but don't want to leave you and your dog in the about to be freezing cold. Do you at least want me to drop you off at a homeless shelter?" "Screw it, I'll just walk to Cali myself," he said, in the mountain town of Arizona, where it's about to be freezing cold, and he has no money, food, or water, with at least 10 miles down a pretty uninhabited road. And I'm pretty sure he didn't have family that lived in the house that he went to. And he just left with his dog, and I sat there dumbfounded, and then left as there was nothing more I could have done at this point. So I don't know where you are, dude, but I hope you're safe, and get help for you and your dog's sake. The college I attended was in a very tiny town in eastern Washington. So eastern, in fact, that it was only about 10 minutes from the Idaho border. There wasn't much to do in Pullman, other than drink and go to parties. I had never really been much of a partygoer myself, so I was one of few not spending every single weekend getting hammered. One of those weekends, I had spent pretty much the whole day in my dorm room and was antsy for some social interaction. I hadn't done much that day other than study, and I wanted to at least get out of my dorm. I texted my best friend at the time, and we decided we would go to the football stadium to look at the stars. The football stadium at the time remained open 24/7, and at the time we left, it was around 12 AM, so the stadium lights had shut off, and we had a beautiful view of the stars. We walked to the stadium in great spirits and had a wonderful night talking and laughing. On the way back, everything changed. By the time we were leaving back to our dorm rooms, it was a little after 2 in the morning. We were walking down the main road when we see a Jeep approaching. Nothing too unusual. However, the lights were off, so my best friend, not knowing how to SSDGM, used her hands to make a flashing signal at them, telling them their lights were off. As soon as she did this, they got only a short distance past us when we heard them slam on their brakes and turn around, driving up the wrong lane of traffic to come back. We were right by a sky bridge at the time this happened, which had stairs leading up to the bridge. We ducked behind the stairs, but the Jeep was driving back and forth, looking for us. We ended up having to play a sick game of duck and hide on the stairs until the Jeep finally parked. When they did, we had gotten to the top of the stairs and laid ourselves flat on the sky bridge, hiding in the shadows. We had a clear view of them, and as soon as we were flat on the ground, we see 5 men get out of the Jeep. Not just that, but they each had a baseball bat. These men were checking the bushes and surrounding areas again, looking for us. I called the police and quietly explained the situation. After about 10 minutes of the men searching and whistling and swinging their bats around, they finally left. Not long after, the police showed up, but there wasn't much they could do but offer us a ride home in their cruiser. I have no idea what those men's intentions were, but I am so glad I never found out. So, to the creepy 5 men on Stadium Way, let's not meet. This just happened about an hour ago, so my memory is fresh. First off, I'm living very rural, in a small village with maybe 10 to 15 houses, but close to the highway. You can drive there within maybe 5 minutes, and also about 10 minutes away from the town. If you cross the street, it just takes you about a 10-minute walk to reach the forest. Christmas Day, in the afternoon, my partner and I decide to go for a little digestive walk as we were really stuffed from all the food. It was about 5 p.m. and already dark when we left, and we had a big and bright LED flashlight with us. I also took my camera and my flash, as I love taking pictures of nature at night. We decide to walk on a little country road towards the forest and then turn right, following a small gravel cycle track close to the forest border, which connects our village to the next. Maybe 15 to 20 minutes walk between the villages. In the middle part of the track, if you walk through a small bit of forest, it's rather dark and the trees are very high and quite dense. When we entered, I saw our flashlight reflecting on something and recognized a car being parked there on the side of the track close to the trees. This struck me as odd, as cars are not allowed to drive there, and the path is very narrow and hidden, so I was a bit cautious. My partner pointed the light inside of the car, and it seemed to be empty. I also noticed the windows were frozen, so it must have been parking there for a while. A bit in front of the car, I spotted a tree with an intriguing structure, and I asked my partner to point the flashlight towards it, so I could focus better and photograph it with my flash. After I took a few images, my partner told me, there's someone standing behind us in the middle of the road. He's looking at us. Nobody was following us the whole way. I kept looking around and behind us occasionally, because at this time in the evening, and close to the border of the forest, there are boars sometimes, and it's mating season, so they get more aggressive than usual. Indeed, there was a man standing behind us, staying out of the flashlight's reach. He wasn't saying anything, just standing there and facing us. At first, I thought he might be startled, as it may seem a bit weird if someone's just taking photos of your car. It wasn't even legal to drive on that path with the car. I decided to get up and confront him from a distance, explaining to him that I was just taking photos of that tree. He didn't react and just stood there. I then went on to ask him if he needed some light, and he replied that this wasn't necessary. It was odd, but I was still calm, sure about there being a normal explanation for his behavior. Nonetheless, my partner and I decided to just get out of there and followed the path leading to the next village. It was maybe 5 to 7 minute walk until we reached it. I remembered the letters on his license plate, not the numbers though, unfortunately, and Googled it, and it turned out that it was from a city about 6 hours away from our village. Mind you, the country I live in is in a very strict lockdown right now, so you're only allowed to travel, even by car, if you have very urgent reasons. After we reached the first lantern of the next village, we looked back and observed the car driving a bit out of the forest, turning around and going back inside. I was able to see that he had parked there again and turned his lights off. He didn't leave the forest. We then went home on a much longer way than initially intended, as I didn't want to go back there for obvious reasons. Our flashlight battery died on the way, and my phone battery was low, so I didn't want to call the police back then, but I called them as soon as I arrived home and gave them all the details. I regret that I didn't memorize the whole license plate, but it was so surprising that I seriously didn't think about it. And him having no light and not responding, he did seem to be sneaking up on us when I sat down to take the photo. I think I was very lucky to have my partner, the camera, and the bright light with me. I don't want to imagine what could have happened if I was alone. When I told my housemate, she theorized that he may have been spying on the house, very close to the forest border, as you can easily look into their backyards without being seen. You have to walk up the hill a bit further, maybe about 5 minutes. I think it's likely. I had thought of photographing the car when I entered the forest part of the path, but somehow I felt unwell about it and decided not to do it, despite it being an interesting scene. In hindsight, I believe this saved me, as he must have hidden behind the trees close to the car and the forest entrance. If he was really planning a burglary, or worse, dumping a body, I think it's not unlikely he may have attacked me if he had realized I had potentially taken a photo of his car with a recognizable license plate. Update. Went back and found a tape marking on one of the trees. A very small hideout, more to store things than to sit in, as well as some cut-off part of a backpack. At first, I wasn't going to share this story, but now I'm more over the situation. Before we start, judge me all you want, but I know I can be a bit stupid. It's only because I don't want to force myself to live on the edge because of all the sick people in this world. I live my life as freely and fearlessly as I possibly can. At the time of the story, I was 23. My birthday just passed the 29th of November, making me 24 now. I'm only 5'2" and about 170 to 180 pounds. I'm strong enough to help move furniture, but not strong enough to defend myself the way I would like. You would think, as someone who survived an attempted sexual assault, I would learn some self-defense, but I've lost a lot of motivation and self-worth since. The abusive relationship really made it worse, but that's besides the point. So, to start, I won't get into major details, but I had just moved to Jackson, Tennessee from Miami, Florida, because I had just gotten out of an extremely physically and emotionally and mentally abusive relationship that lasted 3 years. About sometime in June, my current boyfriend and I had been doing trips pretty much every weekend. We would visit a new hiking and waterfall area. Although there isn't a nightlife, Tennessee is amazingly beautiful. We went to this place called Narrows of the Harpeth. This was one of the underwhelming places we've been, but still relaxing. After, we found a cool place to sit and swim after hiking for 2 hours. A few shots and one blunt later, it was time to make the hour trip back to Jackson. I put my shoes on and I slipped my dress back on, which is a little bit above the knee length. I own my body and sexuality, so showing some skin never really bothers me, and I don't really think about it because I just expect people to respect me as I respect them and the way they dress. Anyway, on the way back to the car, I, being the tipsy dumbass I am, managed to trip and fall and scrape my leg pretty badly. It's actually scarred now. Anyway, I tell my boyfriend we need to go to Walmart once back in Jackson so I could thoroughly clean my wound with hydrogen peroxide and neosporin, and my boyfriend says okay. An hour later, we're at Walmart. Mind you, it's only about 9 PM going on 10 PM, not late by any means. We get what I need, but because I'm still tipsy and pretty high from the blunt that I finished in the car ride home, I get distracted so easily and remembered that my boyfriend got me the wrong size case for my iPhone 11 Pro. He got the Max instead of the Pro. I wanted an idea of what I could trade it for, and he wanted to look at some of the games as well as a gaming PC for me. So I'm happily tipsy and excited to find a new case, which, if you've ever been to Walmart, the cases are never in order and often cause you to bend down to look at things. There was this man looking at the cases, and I just said, "Excuse me, sorry, can I look at those cases you're standing in front of?" He just looked at me with a blank yet dirty look, nodded, and stepped over. As I'm happily looking through the shelf, about 5 minutes in, this lady, and what I assume to be her 2 children, approaches me. Mind you, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm thrown off by how close she is to me, especially with her baby that looks no older than 9 months. I step back, and she grabs my arm and says, "Oh my God, wow, I haven't seen you in forever. Look at that hair, wow." And her grip tightens. At this point, my heart is racing, my face gets so hot, and I'm visibly scared. And that's when my boyfriend says, "Everything okay, babe?" He looks at me equally concerned. I'm thinking to myself, does this lady know my mum? Who is she? Is she an old family friend I don't remember? Mind you, I'm originally from Ohio. We have family here, but I don't know any of my family that lives in Tennessee. Also, my mum loves to brag about her kids, so I'm trying to shake this weird feeling, but her daughter keeps looking behind me. So I go to turn around, and she goes, "No, don't turn around. Walk with me, please. Trust me." I don't know why, but I felt she was being genuine, and I just followed her. We step over to the side by the baby clothes, which is still in front of the electronics, and she says, "Baby, I'm sorry to scare you, but there are 3 men surrounding you. They went by the laptops, talked, and then I noticed the guy taking photos and videos of you while you were bent over looking at the cases. The other man was the tall guy next to you, and I don't know where the 3rd man went." All I can remember is this high-pitched ringing in my ears. My stomach flipped, and I felt like I was going to be sick. I never knew what people meant when they say everything slowed down, but in that moment, everything moved in slow motion, and I was freaked out to the point where I have no clue what she said after that. It was as if I blacked her out for a moment, and then quickly came to the realization that the family and my boyfriend were looking at me visibly panicked. I turned around, and there he was. He's Hispanic, shorter than me, maybe 5'1", but he was very much built, also looked to be about 40. The other man, who was white, about maybe in his 40s, was about 5'11". I'll never forget the dead black rage in that Hispanic man's eyes. Like his first meal in 5 days had been stolen from him, and he was ready to kill in order to have it back. That's when I saw the white man walk over to him. They said something, both looked at me, looked back at each other, and said something else and started to walk slowly towards us. At that point, we all turned and headed for the registers, and that's when I thanked my lucky stars, because there were about 3 cops at the front of the store. By the time I rudely pushed past people to get to the self-checkout, with tears in my eyes and frantically repeating "excuse me" to anyone who got in front of me, I looked back and saw them standing there, but with the 3rd guy this time. My heart sank, and I wanted to pass out at that moment. I guess it looked like I was going up to the cops, because the men hightailed it when it looked like I was going up to the cops. Me being high as hell, and being a black woman, I wasn't going to chance the cops turning this around on me, because I was simply stoned and tipsy. My only thought was, get to the car, get to the gun, and don't stop. My boyfriend said he could barely keep up with me, and at one point, I had grabbed his hand so tight he had to force the grip off, because it felt like I was going to crush his hands. And before anyone bashes my boyfriend, I don't expect a man to be my savior. Also, he isn't the angry, confrontational type. He's very calm and level-headed. He wouldn't even hurt a fly, unless I asked him to get rid of it for whatever reason. I just knew I was the target and I'm putting him at risk. I knew they could easily jump him and one of them could overpower me after taking him out. I probably looked crazed, half walking and running past everyone, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to become another missing sister. We made it to the car safely and peel out of there. I've never seen him drive so fast, as he is beyond careful and would never speed. We sat at a Sonic for about an hour to make sure we weren't being followed. We recounted everything that happened. I just couldn't believe we both were too tipsy to notice that I had become prey in somewhere as simple as a Walmart. I never felt so stupid and irresponsible in my life. I never want to experience that fear and panic in my life again. I didn't even get a chance to thank the lady who pretty much saved us. Sometimes we talk about it. What if the lady didn't see what the guy was doing? Even if we catch on, there were 3 and we only saw 2 at first. I think of the horrors. That night, I had a nightmare that the men attacked us in the parking lot. Creepiest part of the dream was the third man shoved me in the trunk, and as I went to look at his face, all I could see was a featureless face. I woke up in tears that night, realizing that I didn't get a clear look at the third guy's face. It took me nearly a month to enter a Walmart again. Since then, I've moved states and have only been into a Walmart once since moving here. So to the creepy men that stalked me, upskirted me, and basically followed me even when they knew I was around other people, I genuinely hope we never meet again, because the gun I carry on my person now has 3 beautiful halos that would enjoy meeting you all.